Um, there we go. All right, so welcome everybody to the October ISSA Columbus, Georgia meeting. So um, we have elections coming up next month. I just want to reiterate that. So November elections, send candidates if you're interested in yourself and being one of the 4 officer positions, please send an email to myself. You can send it to nigel.k.miller@gmail.com, or you can send it to the email address this whole invite came from. You can just reply to that. So you can just let me know who you think might be a good candidate for it. We'll of course reach out to those people and talk to those people and make sure that they're willing to take over those positions. And then we will open up a vote for that. So with us today, without further ado, we have James Azar, who is a CISO and host of the cyber podcast, CISO Talk, and a new privacy podcast called Goodbye Privacy. So we're very fortunate to have you, James, and we're very excited. I believe this is mostly an open conversation for us to interrupt you with all of our random questions as we go through this, if you're okay with that.
I am quite okay with the discussion. I hear myself talk on the podcast every day for about 10 minutes, and that's about as much as I can take of myself to myself in one day. That's about my cap. I can't do any more than that. I will share a few things before we get started. So I am going to put up this PowerPoint that I made. Yes, I know it's a PowerPoint. I get it.
I love PowerPoints.
But they're all pictures. There's no text outside of just letting you know who I am. Everything else is going to be pictures. There will be text on the pictures, but that's not text I wrote. It's just to highlight something. We're going to talk about targeted cyber attacks. So something very interesting happened as I was working on this presentation. And I don't know if you guys are, Nigel just brought up the elections. And yesterday, DNI and the FBI kind of came out with a really big announcement. And depending on what news media you cover, this has been covered all across the spectrum. But the bottom line was that the FBI and DNI have found that Iran is actively meddling in the presidential election. They were sending emails pretending to be the Proud Boys, targeting Democratic registered voters in the states of Florida and Alaska. 2 more states have been confirmed, all to be battleground states, including Wisconsin and Michigan. Those are 2 other states that have been reported. So we're going to talk about targeted cyber attacks, but I already know where we're going to go with this. So I'm just I'll try to we'll address that as well. I didn't build a slide for it because I really kind of wanted to kind of keep it easygoing and so forth. And so I do host 3 different podcasts. I am a full-time CISO. When people ask me, when do you sleep? I say between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. And sometimes I'll take a half-hour nap midday. But that's about it. So we live in an interconnected world of devices. Everything that you see on there is in somehow, some way connected to the internet. Anyone seen those new Samsung fridges at Home Depot or Lowe's where you can have, it has an app where you can see what's in your fridge when you're at the grocery store?
Yep.
Is that the same one that they were playing Xbox games on?
IoTs.
Yeah, IoT, a bunch of different IoT devices, and people go, well, this is great. My car's connected to the internet, my coffee machine, my laptop, my phone, my router, my iPad, my TV, my oven, my fridge, my system, my light bulbs, my security cameras, my AC, everything's connected to the internet, even my watch. And what could possibly go wrong with all of those things being connected on the internet? Well, let's have that conversation real quick. So this is a very old slide, but it's from a very reliable source. It's the AFP, and it's essentially Tech Terms and Lloyd's of London and Forbes that have done this, the kind of different types of cyber attacks. And the reason I brought this is only because of the top lines. Everyone in here is in cyber. Everyone knows these types of cyber attacks. But they say that cybercrime is costing $400 billion in 2015, thinking that it's going to reach $2 trillion in 2019 globally. We're not talking about the US. The FBI report said that it was around, I think, 100 and some odd billion in 2019 in cyber fraud that was done just in the US alone. But let's have that conversation. And then we have 2020. 2020 was an amazing year. It's a great year. Everyone's having a great time. We've had to wear masks. There's also a little virus out there called COVID-19 that's kind of changed the way everything's happening in the globe today. And what I mean by that is for the last 3-4 years, whenever you go to an event, Black Hat, RSA, any talk, right, that you go to, we're constantly hearing people talk about, well, eventually there's going to be no offices and people will work from wherever they want. But, that's in the distant future. We're not going to talk about that in 2020. We'll talk about that in 2025, 2030. Like, it's on a roadmap. And then came this virus, and it kind of transitioned everything. And what it did is it forced us to move forward faster. And what it created was a hole in our security layer, which made it very easy for our opponents to come over and attack us. This is from the American Hospital Association, released immediately after COVID-19. 4 possible cybersecurity risks related to COVID-19. And the first one, I can confirm, has happened. We've had malware attacks and ransomware attacks on ventilators and life support machines that were connected to the internet. We've seen email phishing campaigns targeting COVID-19. We saw that specifically about a month ago when President Trump got the virus, and threat actors were sending people emails saying President Trump COVID-19 health update, and people were clicking on the links. They were going everywhere. It was very, very much clickbait. VPN, telework, and cloud-based vulnerabilities. Think of that for just a minute. And I want you to think of a report that came out this week by the NSA highlighting the 25 most common used vulnerabilities by the Communist Party of China and their nation-state hackers. And 70% of those were related to VPN and security products, 70%. And finally, telehealth vulnerabilities, the idea of HIPAA, your private information, a lot of different things. So when we look at the most common cyber incidents, we look at ransomware, we look at we look at fund transfer fraud, which is essentially business email compromise. We look at email compromise, and we look at others. But predominantly what we're seeing, everything starts with email phishing. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. At any point in time, feel free to interrupt me. I do move fast. Like I said, we're just talking. So let's talk about the interconnected world of launching attacks. There's an interconnected world where attacks are constantly being launched all the time from all over the place, targeting different networks, targeting different organizations, targeting governments, targeting your thinking and the process of it all. And what we've seen the biggest increase of this year, something that we haven't seen in the last 6 years, is denial of service attacks. Denial of service attacks have now become a staple of attacks for a lot of people. That's how threat actors are doing it right now. And what we're seeing predominantly around the denial of service attacks is this. They're now sending extortion letters to the companies saying, we're going to take down your software, your website, whatever it is that you have. And unless you pay us 10 Bitcoins, 20 Bitcoins, and we're going to launch the attack in 24 hours and there's no way for you to stop it. And now you go, James, how did denial of service attacks come back after we thought we had the thing like solved, right? Cloudflare, Splunk, Cisco. Can I keep naming vendors that say that they've solved denial of service attacks? But how did they come back? Well, if we go back to the first slide, remember all those interconnected IoT devices? And guess where people are spending a lot of their time? I'm going to go back. They're going to spend a lot of their times at home. And now we've made it really easy. Why? Because everyone here recognizes at least a dozen of these icons, right? Social media, what could go wrong with social media? What could possibly go wrong with social media? After all, it's freedom of expression, of speech, it's communication. We as people, when we started to use social media, we saw it as replacing our scrapbook that we kept in our home that maybe we showed our friends privately or our family privately. We looked at social media as a way to replace the post office, as a way to replace phone calls. And so we treated it the same way. And what we've done is we've created a trove of data about ourselves. And that trove of data is being used by these attackers. We've made it easy for them to come after us. They use email phishing not only because it's successful, but because it's easy and it's cheap. Remember, these attackers work from countries where there's no such thing as fair wages. There's stuff called slave labor. And so that slave labor, they're able to employ hundreds of thousands of people in some cases that I've seen, that all they do is data mine our information off all these different social media, build an attack vector, and then hand it off to the guys who execute it. And you go, well, James, what could I possibly do on social media? Anyone recognize any one of these? Anyone ever done one of these? Stop giving people your personal information to guess your passwords and security questions. I've seen these. I've used this when I've done phishing attacks or simulated attacks within our own organization. I'll go online. I'll find someone's Facebook page, Twitter page, Instagram. They've got a bunch of these questionnaires on there where they're tagging their girlfriends, their aunts, their uncles, their moms, their sisters, you name it. And all of a sudden I have a trove of data. And you go, James, what could you do with this data? Well, really easily, I can create a very convincing phishing email and add a line or two about your best friend, about if you don't remember me, that time we met when you were on vacation in San Diego, and you wouldn't know a thing of difference. You wouldn't think twice as to, well, no one would really know that. No one would know that until they look at your social media. Sorry, these graphics are a little bit bad, but it's not the graphic that matters. It's your phone. Your phone has become the new attack vector. I don't know how many of you guys, and I know you're all muted and some of you guys have your cameras off, so I can't see you, so I can't ask you to raise your hands, but I will say this. How many of you guys have gotten these text messages where you're getting a weird link that takes you somewhere that tells you you're getting something? Smishing, the new form of phishing.
I get them constantly. I don't know what I've signed up for.
Well, it's not what you've signed up for. Once you've filled out your phone number and they have your phone number, you go into that database. Once you're in that database, you're a target. And click it once, even if you don't do anything, even if you just click it to go to a website that's doing credential harvesting, you're on the list of someone who clicks. So they know, okay, he clicks. Let's keep getting him there until to the point where we nail him with a message that's going to make him either give us his credentials or download a payload on his phone. And what we're seeing now predominantly is the download of the payload. And when people go download of the payload, what do you mean? And we're seeing that now they're downloading, they're getting phones, specifically Android devices, to go to download either an app or they download a payload that runs in the background that takes over your home network. And guess where people are working from nowadays because of COVID? Home. And so now that I have your home network, and if you're not tech savvy, I can take over all of your internet traffic. I can see everything you're doing, and I can get into your work laptop. And just like that, I'm in. So when we talk about hackers, I hate this picture. I hate it because it shows hackers all with hooded and sunglasses. Like hackers look like Nigel. They look like DJ. They look like me. They look like Loretta. I mean, if I took my jacket off, I wanted to kind of look a little bit respectable for this, but that's brilliant, Nigel. I love it. I love it.
Make sure you guys know.
Nigel, I don't know which one. I'm going to say you're the guy with the bag of cash.
In that case, I'm the guy with the club chasing them.
And here's what we've got, guys. We've got a world where this is what the public thinks of hackers. when they don't understand that the reality is we're facing nation states. And then we go to this. Let's blame people. Oh, blaming the humans. I love it when people do that. My favorite image of this is not the ring, it's Homer Simpson. I don't know if anyone here, if you haven't seen The Simpsons, I don't know what planet you've been living on. If you don't know who Homer Simpson is, I pity the fool. But Homer Simpson, if you guys remember, whenever there would be a crisis at the nuclear power plant, he would straight Fukushima the thing, right? Like, I mean, he wouldn't know what to do, how to shut it down, all these buttons. And that's what we've done with security to the normal humans. We've created all these buttons, all these different confusing things. We're telling people to be careful, not to click, what to click, instead of really addressing the aspect that people are always going to make mistakes. To err is human. And we have to find technology that helps overcome those errors. And that's my challenge to a lot of people who work in security. And so that takes me to one of my last slides, and then I'm going to open this up for discussions, which is, folks, whether you want to agree with my statement or not, and we can debate that, we are in the middle of World War III. World War III does not exist in the realm of airplane tanks. It exists in the realm of cyber. It exists in the realm of disinformation, and it exists in the realm of the greatest transfer of wealth in human history. See, you don't win a war anymore by having the best planes or the biggest tanks. You win war by having more money. Having more money gives you more power gives you more influence. And doing that, we see this specifically happening with China and the road and whatever initiative they've got, the Silk Road 2.0 that they've got going on, that where they're buying up countries all across Southeast Asia. They're building a massive infrastructure campaign in Africa and in specific strategic ports. And they're doing that. And at the same time, they're launching active cyber campaigns to disrupt not only other countries and disrupt and make people question their way of life, they're also doing it to steal IP and money. North Korea and Iran are actively engaged at this time in financing their governments through cyber fraud. That's been corroborated by the FBI, by the Secret Service, by DNI, by the NSC, and multiple others. We are in the midst of a battle, and the reason no one talks about this battle is because it's not sexy. It has no real victims, because who wants to say they've been breached when the moment they say they've been breached and they were a victim of a crime, they're abused online, their share prices go down, their stakeholders absolutely lose their mind, and people are fired and lose their jobs. And so we've created this perfect storm of targeted attacks, and it's all about the money. Show me the money. And that's what these guys are after. It's all about money all the time. And once they get the money, they go away, and then they come back a year later to get it again, because they know your insurance policy is going to pay for them to come back a year later and get another $1 million out of you, another $100,000 out of you, $500,000 out of you, $50,000 out of you, and so forth. And so our biggest threat is the single greatest transfer of power. I had the opportunity to meet Frank Abagnale Jr. If you guys remember the movie Catch Me If You Can. He's still an FBI agent. He now works in the cybercrime fraud division at the FBI. He's actually their face. He does a lot of their speaking engagements. And Frank brought up the fact that the FBI sees over $400 billion a year lost to cybercrime.
Wow.
And if you think of that, that is the greatest single transfer of wealth in human history.
So is that like stolen money, like somebody transferred a dollar amount or some sort of, or is that the cost to recover from it as well?
No, that is the stolen amount of money. When you look at business email compromise alone cost, I can tell you that in the first quarter of 2020, I saw one report, and I can't disclose because I saw it in confidence. We saw over $89 billion lost to business email compromise. $89 billion across the country. And someone has to pay that. The consumer pays for it, an insurance company pays for it, the bank pays for it, depending on who the customer is. The company pays for it. There's a cost to this, but people don't quite comprehend that. People don't quite settle in with that thought. And so I'm gonna open it to Q&A. I'm very quick in my presentations, like I told Nigel, DJ, and Loretta. I make it very fast, very quick, 15 minutes, and I'm right at my mark. These are all my podcasts. I'll leave these on screen so you guys can subscribe whenever you want. And I'll stop sharing my screen here. And we'll open it up to Q&A and discussion.
Everybody hear me?
Yes.
My question is, what is the most highly valued currency you've seen being targeted for theft? I know we talked about money, but money is just a form of currency. I'm just wondering, aside from information like data, what are you seeing a big ticket item being boosted, such as I know Bitcoin is our new form of currency, but there are lots of different ways currency. China is trying to invent a social currency that they can manage over there with their social system. So I'm just curious to see what you've come across.
So we look at the way business email compromise is done today. And business email compromise is done by international gangs who utilize people within the US to establish different bank accounts, to establish companies. And they switch bank accounts every 2 weeks. I mean, I'm on the electronic crime task force here in Georgia with the Secret Service. And I've seen cases where we'll reach a bank account and they've done, 30, 40, 50 different business email compromises on that account within 2 weeks. And then we go and we shut it down and we freeze whatever money's left in there, but then that money's gone and it's offshore already. And sometimes they're so darn successful, Daniel, that they forget to transfer money for a few days because they're making so much money in their other accounts. We see Bitcoin as being extremely popular simply because of its availability, meaning it's easier to monetize Bitcoin than other cryptos. And so, and it's easier to trade on it, especially within the dark web, especially within the hacker communities, the cyber criminal communities. They trade on Bitcoin. And the crypto mining and crypto jacking, by the way, is something that they practice in all the time. I've seen breaches where they're sitting on a company's cloud infrastructure and they're mining, Bitcoins, they're mining Ethereums, they're mining Monero actively, and you're paying the bill for the computing for them to mine it.
This is Jonathan White. I have a question.
Yes, please.
So right now in America, it's pretty ubiquitous to have homeowners insurance, car insurance, renter's insurance, something like that. Are you expecting for there to be a time when there will be and I'm going to call it cyber insurance for lack of a better term, but that could encompass many things. Are you expecting that that's where we're going to have to go just because most people can't keep up with the changes? They don't understand the nuances. There's so many products that are being released that are internet enabled. They don't know what they have in the palm of their hand with their smartphone. Are you expecting that most people as a consumer driven nation are just going to have to move towards to some sort of paid security to keep themselves safe from all the little mistakes they can make every day?
I think we're going to see a marketplace of vendors that come to solve that problem. I think the insurance industry as a whole is less inclined to do any more cyber insurance. They're paying out the wazoo right now. A lot of them are not making money. In fact, we've seen a decline in the number of cybersecurity underwriters this year than previous years, where we've seen an increase. This year, we've seen a decrease in the number of underwriters willing to take on. We've seen insurance companies come together to build policies for large enterprise. So when you think of like a Fortune 50 or a Fortune 100, their policy is probably with every single cybersecurity underwriter in the industry, because they don't do the standard $1 million policy. They're doing something probably close to 20 or 40 or 50 million dollars in cyber insurance. So from a personal perspective, from a human side, I don't see companies rushing to sell people cyber insurance. I think that's going to create a backlog, and how do you insure someone, from, think of it from cyber stalking perspective. Does cyber stalking get covered? Does your jealous, ex-girlfriend who takes over your Facebook account or Instagram account, does that constitute an insurance claim? And then at that point, if that happens, then there's a criminal aspect to that happening, which would force law enforcement to take specific action against it. And I think as a society, we're not there yet. When you bring up a great point, Jonathan, and my look at that is the cybersecurity industry is going to solve that. And I'm already seeing it. I have a lot of small MSPs, small MSSPs, regional ones that are now saying like, hey, I'm building a home solution for people working from home where I go in and I put in a router with a firewall. I segment their networks and it costs them, maybe $100 a month to have this service, or $200 a month and a setup fee. And I think a lot of companies are going to look at that solution long term and reimburse their employees part of it to take that action to secure their home and create segmented networks. And eventually it'll be no difference than, having a Ring doorbell, which most homes today have a Ring doorbell. And so you'll have a different router. I mean, I can tell you, even speaking to Xfinity and AT&T, they're talking about launching cybersecurity for homes already, and they're buying up companies, and they're looking at products, and they're looking at price points, and it's going on right now with Xfinity in test markets where they're testing selling a router and a firewall for people's homes and setting it up and so forth, and charging them an extra few bucks a month.
Thank you.
So I'm really interested in, so when I think of home networks being compromised and so other devices on your network can compromise your work machine, I wonder if there's going to be an uptick in like always on VPNs with workstations or hardware VPN connected devices. They used to have these Cisco devices you'd have at your home. You'd plug a corporate phone into it in your laptop or desktop or something. I wonder if there's going to be an uptick in that, because
so I can tell you that my conversations with other CISOs right now, when we talk to our VPN partners, we're saying, I hope everyone here doesn't mind if I use the S word, fix your shit. And I say that because when you look at most of the vulnerabilities that are allowing these bad actors to get into our environments, and just look at the Fortinet, Pulse, Secure VPN, Palo Alto, a lot of the vulnerabilities that have led to some of the massive breaches have come from VPN products within corporate environments, within security companies who've had vulnerabilities, and then they couldn't manage the fact that their customers needed to patch it. And so I actually believe that we're going to see a world post VPN. Like I honestly believe that a VPN will not have a market in 3 to 5 years. Mm-hmm. I think more people are going to move to dedicated routers, static IP addresses, segmented home networks. I think when you look at who's getting into the home-based internet security business, it's the big boys. It's AT&T, it's Xfinity, it's Verizon. And, they're not talking to you or me, Nigel. They're talking to the CISOs over at JP Morgan Chase, at Citi, and they're asking, Wells Fargo, and they're saying, hey, what are you guys doing? And what do you guys need from us to support your employees who are working from home? And so beyond bandwidth, the conversation, and then I was in one of those roundtables that one of the big communications companies did 3 months ago. And I was sitting in a room with probably 20, we were in a Zoom meeting like this one, 27 of us being moderated by a big communication person. And they kept the questions, and what they were aiming to find out is how could they get into the organizations by essentially getting the company to buy you, Nigel, or you, DJ, or you, Loretta, or George, or anyone on the call, a router and a static IP address, and then how do you manage static IPs, right? Because those are really, really big things, right? I mean, we're not talking about, we say it and we go, oh, it's simple, but for them, their system isn't built to give every single home in America a static IP address and a non-static IP address, and build segmented networks and put one router in that can segment and connect one devices. I mean, you're talking about something that's really complex and can't be executed in 3 to 6 months. It's going to take I think 2 to 3 years. But I think VPN is, I don't even look at as much for VPN for people to come in from home with MFA, with static IP addresses, with BYOD policies. I mean,
so this is probably making Jeff Bezos even more of a trillionaire. But a lot of people are moving to the AWS workspace as well. So that may, it's very easy to deploy that, and that seems like it would probably protect even on workstations that are not very well maintained.
Yeah, we're moving to AWS.
Yeah.
Black.
Yep. James, George has a question.
George, the floor is all yours.
Hi, nice to meet you guys here, James. So my question is this: in your capacity as a professional, and it's very interesting you bring up IoTs, how they're used, for distributed denial of service attacks, and in a way, it still boils down to lack of security education on the part of the user. But in your capacity as a professional, do you think there is a change in the mindset and the culture of most organizations whenever there's a breach? Not to point fingers at, let's say whoever is the head security analyst or the CISO, but rather to lay more emphasis on, security awareness training for the end user. Because I've met a lot of individuals who, whenever they get a phishing text or an email, they just click on the link. They don't even care about it. So do you think companies are really laying a lot more emphasis on taking security awareness training much more seriously rather than pointing fingers at their security staff?
So they will never stop blaming the security staff. You need a scapegoat for everything. And God darn it, every single person that's on this call, the finger's always going to be pointed at you. I think the idea of security awareness within a staff goes to the ability of understanding the human brain. And Chris Roberts and I did a podcast on Friday last week that I'd urge anyone to go listen to. He gave a presentation on Monday at the Tel Aviv University Cyber Week where he talked about the brain, analog humans in a digital world. And so what you're talking about is people who click every link that they get. So those are what we call happy clickers. And I have a very good friend of mine who lives in Istanbul. And my friend in Istanbul is a great guy, smart guy, savvy business guy. But if you talk to him on the phone, all you hear is click, 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 click. Me and him will sit on the phone at 11, p.m. here in the States, and it'll be like 6 a.m. in Istanbul, and he hasn't slept all night, and he's just clicking all day long, like he's doing like 5-6 clicks a second. I'm like, how do you even do that, right? You can't change human behavior. You can build technology to offset that, but this whole idea of more awareness training, speak to normal people who aren't in security and go be like, hey, tell me the last time, and KnowBe4 is a sponsor of my podcast. So I just want to say that right now, like I love KnowBe4 and they have some great stuff, but let me tell you something. How many people really want to go do a training? And how many people really pay attention to that training? So the idea of awareness has got to go from outside of the traditional realm of training. KnowBe4 has a great show called Insider Man. And I don't know if any of you guys have seen it. They've got 2 seasons. It's 8-minute episodes, kind of runs like a Jack Bauer 24 kind of deal mixed with The Office, right? So a bunch of people in the office, it's free. You can catch it on their website. It's called Insider Man. It's a really, really cool show. 8-minute episodes with professional actors. It's not like some amateur, kind of like it's a real seasoned show. And they kind of take you through people making cyber mistakes during work and then how you can address it. Like, all of a sudden it's 4:30, you're supposed to leave at 5, your boss comes in and he goes, I have all these things I need you to do before you go home. And you're like, okay, I'm not leaving until 7-8 o'clock today. And that makes you really likely to make mistakes at that moment. I think in integrating George VR and doing like VR trainings for people who aren't in cyber around cybersecurity. I did that last year. I took CISOs to Israel with me, and we went to this restaurant and we got a briefing from my buddy who runs the Iranian cyber unit in 8200 in Israel. He came by and gave us a classified security briefing on Iranian cyber activities. I mean, I'm talking like straight up, like we saw shit we can't talk about, right? Otherwise, the Mossad will come kill me. And my wife's Israeli, and I'm pretty sure she was Mossad, although she won't tell me. And so I don't want to die tonight. So I can't share anymore. But they all. One of the things I did is I brought them all VR glasses, and in the VR glasses we had built a training. A cyber awareness training. And if you guys know a lot of the big hackers in our industry, I don't know if you guys know who Idona Orr was, but he was one of the greatest researchers for Kaspersky. He now started his own company literally last month. Idona Orr is probably one of the best cyber hackers I know. Like, the guy's just brilliant. And so we did a whole production with him in VR, and the CISOs who were sitting in the room were fascinated by this. They were like, wow, this is great. And I'm like, yeah, so think of putting like 3 pairs of VR glasses in your break room. And when employees come in every day, you have a different training loaded on there. And they spend 2 to 3 minutes doing it, 5 minutes doing it. VR is cool. People like to do VR, right? It's a new technology. Yeah. It's interesting. So we have to find different ways to engage people around awareness. Beyond just the punishment of training or failing or clicking a link. I think that's so outdated. I try to kind of always lead the discussion to what can we do that's more innovative right now to really address human behavior.
Thank you.
Other discussions, other questions. DJ, you had a bunch and you held out, so why don't you take over?
It's more like I had comments to kind of like add on, just because I really enjoyed, just kind of going through, and I say I enjoy it, it's just a fun conversation to have. But just kind of talking about how interesting it is that, now that we're working from home, the thing that would be, getting people in trouble is literally the kids being on the Wi-Fi and playing their Xbox or playing Roblox and playing all these other games. And lo and behold, there's a new game that a lot of people have been playing as well, called Among Us. And the way it does, the way it's programmed, because it's originally programmed to be a mobile game, it's very, very vulnerable if you actually look at the back end. So they actually recommend that you use like a VPN or some other way to play the game, so you're not opening up your network to possible hackers. So yeah, it's just a kind of a fun discussion to kind of like have that, and again, it's purely from like a gaming standpoint. It's interesting that, because
Let's talk about that for just 1 second, because we brought up Robux in our pre-call, and I was trying to find a way to incorporate it here. And I was like, do I want to talk about people's kids? Do I really want to put it on pen and paper? Do I really want to put it in a PowerPoint? I felt really bad. And I was hoping you'd bring it up so we can address it. So games that kids play are absolutely a target for attackers. And if you remember my slide with all the social media icons on it, right? The hundreds and hundreds of social media icons. I've seen CEOs of companies targeted and hacked through their kids. Major companies. Major. Where, because he's the CEO of a company, every press release about the CEO with the good news about the CEO goes, Robert is married to his wife, Cheryl, with their kids, Justin, Nigel, and DJ, and they live in Columbus, Georgia. And you go, wonderful. So now I'm looking for, Nigel, Smart, who lives in Columbus, Georgia on social media. That's very easy for me to find. Most kids don't have the privacy setting. They just allow random people to follow them, right? And I build a profile to interact with that child. and eventually I send them a picture or a payload or anything like that, and they're connected to the home Wi-Fi, and dad comes home from work, and dad's the CEO of a very big company, and dad opens his laptop because he's going to do some work in his office, and I'm in his home Wi-Fi network. And that was before COVID.
Then there's that time period in which even if you're a good VPN user, there's that time period in which your machine is still vulnerable.
Mm-hmm. That gap there. That's a fantastic example of spear phishing right there, though.
The company I'm at just implemented always on VPN now, so they're not giving us a choice.
Got a feeling you're about to destroy that, aren't you, James?
I am about to destroy that. I'll tell you something very interesting. I was having a conversation yesterday or day before yesterday with several CISOs, and we were talking about the road warriors. So one of the biggest concerns for most security people before COVID was your road warriors, right? They're going to a hotel every night of the week. They're traveling. They're always on Wi-Fi. And so they were used to logging into their VPN, connecting to the internet at a hotel and working. Well, what happened when they got grounded because of COVID? Their behavior changed completely. They're like, I'm home. I don't need this. And they weren't logging in through VPN.
Again, the awareness.
They weren't doing anything to do with security. And here's the challenge with that. You can say awareness, and you can say people should always have their VPN on, and all of that is wonderful and great. But at the end of the day, if I see your device on the home network and I'm your cyber opponent, I'm connecting to your device. And whether you encrypt through VPN or whether you just, this whole idea of just encryption, if I can get you at that point, get your device to take a payload, I can get you to click on a link. I can get you to go to a malicious website. I can target you through an advert, because guess what? When you're not working, you're not on VPN. Because VPN's for work. But at 5 o'clock, you stop working, you crack open a bottle of wine that you got from Guide Point, and you sit down and you go, you know what? I want to go to the darkest place on the internet. I'm going to Twitter. And I am going to go to Twitter, and I'm going to go off VPN. And I now know that you're off VPN because I'm in your home network, and I see that you're on Twitter, and I interact with you on Twitter.
And there's even more things going on in large companies that cannot handle the VPN traffic, so they end up split tunneling. So that a lot of these connections going out are actually split tunneled off directly to Microsoft, or directly to Teams, or directly to something else. And you can click a link and there will be no protections except for your endpoints.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Please, Loretta, all yours.
I attended the virtual.conf 2020 of Splunk past 2 days, and one of the takeaways that I find as a challenge for the holidays is this tech had created a home dashboard, and he had everything connected. I mean, he had his network diagrammed at the speed. It had to stay at the speed that he was paying for, or he'd call his ISP. He had the wine cellar, the temperature in there. He had his children's network, and it would go off at a certain time. He had his car hooked up to let him know that, oh yeah, I have to get gas in the morning, or my battery's running low or not working. Or he had a really cool dashboard on there that just showed everything that was happening in his house with his internet, and how he had it segmented and stuff. So Splunk's free, for home use. So I think I'm gonna try to do something with that.
Yeah, I mean, again, you're a security professional, Loretta. And so for you, this is very easy. And I think when I talk to a crowd like us, I'm preaching to the choir. I think every single person here can agree with, let's say, 75% of what I say. And 25% would disagree with that. Maybe 50-50. I don't know. Maybe I'm overly optimistic. But either way, we're all security aware, right? We're all security aware all the time. But the 98% of the population is not. 98% of the population wants to live their life. They want to go on Twitter. They want to go on Instagram. They want to go on Reddit. They want to go on Pinterest. They want to post stuff on Facebook. They want to Google and go to the weirdest websites on the planet. They want to buy from websites that don't secure. So they don't mind if they don't see the lock on the browser, because what do they care? Because if it's an illegitimate charge, you call your bank refunds you the money, they issue a new credit card, and life goes on. And again, this is part of the challenge, is we keep talking about data. And Daniel brought this up in his very, very first question. What's the number one currency? And the currency is money. And the moment banks decide that they're no longer willing to cover cyber fraud, that the moment you fall for cyber fraud, we're not paying for it anymore, Mr. Customer. You've got to deal with your actions and the consequences of your actions. You'll see a lot more people address George's issue, which is awareness. At that point, they're going to become a lot more careful.
I think they're already doing that a little bit. When it comes to these gift card schemes, I've heard of people who the bank is like, we're not refunding that because you completely went about buying this gift card and you took a picture of it and you sent it to somebody that you didn't know. So there are some banks that will not refund that money for gift cards.
I mean, try to go buy a $500 gift card at CVS, and they're going to say, no, somebody is scamming you. Yep. There are so many things that would seem to a normal person that you should not do this. This is not a correct behavior for somebody who is probably really smart in every other facet of their life. But people get wrapped up in both authority and they get confused by the interconnected nature of our lives. They don't know that the person they're talking to is not Microsoft, and they don't. They hear on TV all the time about how this company is this and this company is that. So of course Google is calling you to get you to send them a gift card for X. I mean, there's so much information and there's so much noise. It's very hard to get signal to reasonable, rational people, which honestly, I think is one of the reasons that we need to have this group here in town, is not just to, it's good that we train and build each other up in network and stuff, but we also have to kind of evangelize. We circle up to gather this information, but it doesn't need to stay in the circle. It's kind of got to go out. We have to be talking to our grandparents or to our moms or our children. I mean, my daughter is 14 and she thinks that I'm the absolute devil because I won't let her have social media. It's just, to me, the risk is just, now not just from cyber risks, but other risks, the risk is just too great. And as long as I have control over her, that's how it's going to be. But that time, I mean, it's got an expiration date. I got 3.5 years left.
Yeah. I mean, if you watched The Social Dilemma on Netflix, it was funny. It was very interesting to see the people who created these social media platforms say, yeah, my kids aren't on social media. Like, my kids don't get any screen time. And so that of within itself is something that should be very suspicious to most of us. There was rumors that Steve Jobs wouldn't even give his kids iPhones.
I wonder, right? I've only heard bits and pieces. My wife tells me about that show, and she's like, she is like a Facebook addict, as I personally feel that way anyway. But then she mentions that about they won't, like you mentioned, the people will not let them and let their kids look at it, but it may be because of the drivers that they had to deal with, which was, they wanted as many clicks, they wanted as many times they wanted notifications on your iPhone to blink up, and you look at your phone. They wanted you to look at your phone every 5 minutes or whatever the metrics were that they wanted to track.
Well, they want to control the amount of data you get. And if you guys haven't seen The Social Dilemma on Netflix, it's an hour and a half. It's about an hour and 20 minutes, but it's well spent. A lot of it is for people like us, a lot of it is repetitive. I think they have a very interesting outlook on AI. My outlook on AI was shaped a little bit differently because of that. Simply because I saw what social media companies are doing with AI. And now when I take a vendor meeting and they bring up AI, I ask them much more poignant questions. And if they can't answer them, I don't buy. Right. This whole idea is, AI and AI is going to take over and do all the thinking and take care of everything. I think that's not only over exaggerated. I think we're going to see a lot more consumers demand not to have that much interaction with AI. And we're starting to see that fringe happen now, right? Like, I mean, I'm officially going off Twitter. Like, it's the dark hole of the internet. Just not doing it anymore. George, you have a question?
Oh yeah, it was just a comment, not really a question.
Please.
I mean, it was, I think, 5 years ago that I left Facebook and Twitter. I only am on LinkedIn right now, and that's just because it's professional. But it's very funny what you pointed out and what also Jonathan pointed out. You also pointed out something about the 98%, and it touches all of us because that other 98% of people who are not completely security aware are family, are friends. And they could also be used as a means to pivot into our lives and our professional lives. Of course, human beings are social creatures by nature. That's the way we're designed. But ever since the advent of social media, it's become more imperative for people to speak, people to show something, publish pictures of their friends, their family, where they're having fun, what they're eating, not knowing that all this information is a treasure trove to an attacker. They could use it to build up a complete profile on you. You're doing all the reconnaissance for them,
Yep.
and you work for big companies and you could be used as a point to get in there. You're the insider doing all their job for them,
Right.
and it's really, really, really ironic that people resist the idea of, it's almost like you're trying to police them when you let them know that, hey, you shouldn't really publish all this stuff if you don't want people to have this big torchlight into your life.
Well, you're trying to change human behavior and then what society has made cool. So society has made it that if you're on Instagram and you take a picture with a bunch of hot girls or guys, if you're a girl on the other end, and you're next to a Lamborghini or a Ferrari, you must be successful, you must be doing well, and everyone should strive to be like you. And we've lost that sense of community and normalcy. And I think one of the biggest enemies of cybersecurity is the lack of community. I think the way for us to be secure in all aspects, when I was an intelligence officer in the US Army, right? The way I gathered intelligence was through communities. You don't gather intelligence you can gather intelligence through a computer, but if you want actionable intelligence, it's only done through communities, right? And we see that. My wife's Israeli. I spend a lot of time in Israel. And I often get asked, they go, why do you think Israelis are so good at security? Well, one, when it's an existential threat to your survival, you tend to get pretty good at security. But the other aspect of security is community. When I lived in Israel, I lived in a small little town. It's a village. It's literally it's a village right on the beach. And we had our own gated entrance. We had one way in, one way out. Not getting in any other way. There's a second entrance, the back end entrance into the farms that we had back there, and they also were gated. And you needed to have a phone that would open that gate for you. You dial a number, and that gate would open. And if you didn't have it, and if your number wasn't registered, like when you called it, if the number didn't recognize you, wouldn't open the gate. But you know how we were able to communicate security? It was all done through community. So if we're able to secure ourselves, right? What do people tell you at the airport? How do they keep the airport secure? If you see something out of place, tell us. Say something. So we're not doing that in security. We're building these walls. We're talking in language people don't understand. We're trying to get them to cooperate by fear, not by will. And so we're losing this battle of awareness. We're losing this battle of this echo chamber because we're simply not addressing the real needs that we need to address. And that is, we need to simplify the way we talk. We need to not only explain consequences, but methods. And we need to be able to be friends to these people and not judge them. You know, the great question by Danny, I forgot who asked it. I think it was Jonathan, but when will we stop blaming, I think it was George, when will we stop blaming security people for breaches? And I go, well, when stakeholders stop looking for someone to blame. Think of the Capital One breach that happened last year. You guys remember it?
Mhm.
Yeah.
There couldn't have been a better execution of an incident response plan and a better running security program than what happened there. They get an email. They look at their email. They get a bug bounty email that says, hey, someone's got your data out there from one of your AWS. I think they got the email on the 17th. On the 19th, they had already patched the issue, called the FBI, launched an incident response program. A week later, the criminal was arrested, right? Couldn't have been done any better.
Mhm.
Textbook. Like, my God, that CISO should be getting a promotion. He should be getting a raise, a bonus for being able to handle that so eloquently. What happened to Mike? Mike was promoted to be a cybersecurity advisor. That was the official press release. I know Mike. Mike's one of the greatest CISOs in this country, one of the most efficient people out there. He built a perfect security program. And I mean perfect as it can get. And how many of us have bug bounty email addresses where people submit tips and they get checked once a week on a Friday afternoon by a low-level junior associate? That didn't happen in Capital One. And he still got fired. Right? So this whole idea of it has the attitude has to change. Like, I speak to a lot of CEOs. I did a talk yesterday with a group of CEOs, and next week I'm doing a talk with critical infrastructure people who are not in cyber. And the idea is we need to talk outside of our circles. We need to take the message, like Jonathan said, outside, but we need to simplify it. And we can't belittle people, and we can't expect everyone to agree with what we say. And we got to expect discourse, and we got to know that we're not going to win every battle. But if you just win one extra battle every single day out of 10 that you fight, that's more people that are secure, and they're going to go out and fight this battle for you. And it becomes much easier to win.
Very true.
Yeah. Are you on mute?
No, you're fine.
Hey, James. So I have
My husband, Fred.
This is
Hey, Fred.
So this is very interesting. So very quickly, do you see any hope for? And I'm going to preface this by saying I'm a very big freedom advocate. I'm against the police state, but I'm frustrated, like everybody else is, when I hear stories of people getting away with doing ransomware and just really messing over people and companies. And it's like these people never get caught. And I was and punished. But where do you see the future of successfully catching criminals, cyber criminals, and prosecuting them, and getting people to be more vigilant? But just the law enforcement, and I don't mean like being vigilantes either, but just being able to have people thwart attacks and law enforcement be able to be successful against cyber criminals who are truly doing crime.
So you have to look at the structure of our criminal justice system today when it comes to cyber. And so that starts with the fact that the investigation of cybercrime today is being handled by the FBI and the Secret Service. So they can only do so much, right? CISA does not investigate crime. CISA is more on the defense side. DOD is more on the defense side and securing our defense infrastructure. And then every single branch of the military has their own cyber command per se. There's Army Cyber Command, Navy, and Air Force. And They are more on the offense defense side, and you got the NSA, and we all know what the NSA does thanks to Edward Snowden. I am all for freedom like you, Fred. I don't think the government should be there. I think when we talk about police reform, funny, I went to a congressional debate that we had here in Georgia, and the lovely people who are running for office, my God, where do we find them? But I asked both candidates. I asked both candidates of Congress. I said, if you talk about, because one of the questions was police reform, and I said, well, why are we not reforming police to also address cybercrime and ACH fraud, and having them become an additional player in that? Now, to give credit to our law enforcement, we get our hands on hackers. The 2014 JP Morgan Chase gang, we got all of those assholes, every single one of them, right? And we know who the people are, but they come from China, they come from Russia, they come from North Korea, they come from Iran, countries where we don't have an extradition treaty. So until they decide to fly out of their country and go for a vacation in Greece or Spain or Cyprus or India, or Israel. I mean, think of the hacker that launched one of the Sergey, what's his name? That went for a vacation with his girlfriend in Israel. I remember when they arrested him in Israel. I was in Israel when that asshole got arrested. And I'll tell you something. He was in an Israeli jail for 4 years because it became a diplomatic game between Russia, Israel, and the U.S. And eventually, President Trump got him. President Trump had to flex some muscle there to get the Israelis to extradite him to the U.S. And so, and he was a Russian actor, and he gave us a ton of information. And so we're getting these guys. They're not getting away with it. But when they're coming from nation states where there's no extradition, it's very hard for us to get them. But then we've put them in a jail. We've put them in a jail where they can't leave China because there's an Interpol red notice for them. And if they go to any Interpol country, they're going to get busted and they're going to, get flown on a plane to New York. The hackers who we are able to catch become assets to our operation to get other people out. So thanks to the ringleader of the JP Morgan Chase hack of 2014, a guy by the name of Gary Shalon, we've been able to bust 7 high-end Russian assets because he's been able to lure him out of Russia, saying like, oh, they're not looking for you. Go to a vacation in Georgia. One of them landed in Georgia. He didn't even get out. The moment he got off the airplane, there was a CIA plane there waiting. They grabbed him, stuck his ass on the CIA plane, and flew his ass right to the U.S. He got a first-class ticket on a G6. But his ass landed in New York and in a federal prison. Another guy was convinced that he could go with his girlfriend. And Russian women are very demanding. I dated a Russian girl in my time in Israel. Let me tell you something. They're all about the money, baby. And so, so she wants to go on vacation to Greece and Spain. So he had a fake passport issued. Well, his fake passport got flagged at border. They flagged the passport over to Interpol. Interpol called U.S. Customs. U.S. Customs got the intel, and this guy woke up on day 5 of his Spain vacation thinking, I'm the king of the world, right? I'm coming back to you, Vlad. I'm coming back to Mother Russia. Well, he woke up one morning and Spanish police were waiting for him outside his cabin, took him in, and then he was extradited to the U.S. 2 days later. So we saw that happen in Greece. We've seen that happen in other places. So we get them. Listen, as Americans, we have a very, very long memory, and we don't, in our law enforcement, regardless of who's in power, we don't give up. We go after these assholes and we get them. I mean, we got bin Laden after, I think, 10 years, and we got El Baghdadi after 5. We'll get every single one of those jerk-offs. It's just a matter of time. They're not going to get away with it. Just remember that.
I have a question, James. So considering, because I know recently Microsoft 365, they suffered a DOS attack, and some services were suspended from online access. Twitter also recently suffered an insider attack as well. Mm-hmm. And I know most organizations, including schools and hospitals of recent, have been facing a lot of ransomware attacks. Do you think that, let's say, for instance, in the United States, there are a large amount of cyber gangs who are coordinating these ransomware attacks just to get Bitcoin indigenous to the United States? Or do you think they're all,
No, no,
APTs,
no. So we have people in the U.S. that have done this. In fact, the FBI in Atlanta busted a Nigerian crime ring that was right here in ATL, not far from any of us, that were doing business email compromise and ransomware attacks to the tune of $270 million. And all 27 of those jerk offs are sitting in Fulton County Jail. And if you've ever seen in a reality TV about Fulton County Jail, that is not a place you want to be in. I mean, you'd literally rather be in Nigeria at that point than be in Fulton County Jail. And so, they're having a great time there. But we see US based. A lot of these international APTs, especially the ones that are in it for the money, have US partners, whether voluntarily or not. Some of it is they scam lonely people. They catfish them. And so they don't even know they're partners to the crime.
Okay.
Some of it is they're using shell companies and crooked lawyers to set it up. Think of Better Call Saul.
Yeah, anything for a buck.
Anything for a buck. But listen, when they're stateside, it becomes much easier. I mean, I've seen, the Atlanta bust. I remember when it happened, I get a phone call and someone sends me the pictures of all the equipment these guys had and all the cash they had in different apartments across Atlanta. And you realize, like, it's right under our nose. You could have been sitting in a restaurant with your girlfriend, in Buckhead or in downtown Atlanta and having dinner, and these guys could be right across from you.
I think Vina wants to ask a question.
Let's do it.
Hi, James.
Hey, Vina.
Hello. This has been very, very good, very interesting. So I wanted to get your thoughts on, do you really think Microsoft has been able to squash TrickBot? What are your thoughts?
No, we know they haven't, because when you look at the TrickBot activity after they came out with the big announcement, there's no decline in the activity of TrickBots. I actually texted Brett and Ann Johnson, the internal and external CISO at Microsoft, and I was like, did PR just put this out without asking you guys? Did someone just start like a chain in Slack, and PR was like, this is magnificent, put it out there, and no one asked you guys about this, because there's no decline in that activity at all.
Yeah, I figured that, because after the news, I think they got more flack than getting more compliments. So.
Well, I can tell you that I haven't been able to access our 365 admin console all day today.
Wow.
Welcome to Microsoft.
Absolutely. Well, thank you.
I know that we're probably we're running to the end of time here, but I have just a not really a technical question. Were you familiar with Jim Browning, the guy that reverse hacks the scammers on YouTube? And I was wondering if that's real. I'm kind of security adjacent. I'm not really a security professional, but those are definitely interesting things to watch if you're familiar with them. And then it appears as though anytime he tries to go to the authorities in India, there's never any real response.
Well, so I'll tell you, as someone who's been to India, you don't get response. It's 1.3 billion people, and it's just impossible to police that many people. India is a massive cyber crime and fraud country, massive. One of the things I will tell you that President Trump and Prime Minister Modi of India signed a few years ago was a law enforcement cooperation agreement against that fraud, meaning that the FBI now, before they used to have, I think, like 25 agents in India, now they have over 250 agents in India working with Indian law enforcement. So it's getting better. I've seen some of those video on YouTube. I don't know that specific person. Some of it seems real. Other part of it is just, monetizing YouTube by saying that you're getting scammers. these guys set up VMs and they have basic IT knowledge. And you got to remember that the Indian on the other end, not every Indian's good in IT. That's just a common misconception. And a lot of these people are poor. They don't have an education and they're trying to get a job. And this job probably pays them more money than any other job they would get. And some of these employees that work in these places are a victim of the fraud master. And if you want to watch anything that covers that, look at 60 Minutes Australia. Australians are the number one victims of this stuff. And 60 Minutes Australia and also the UK, they've gone out to India and they've like been on busts where they bust these fraudulent call centers and places. And those are, I trust those a little bit more than I do some of the stuff that I see on YouTube. But I think we're out of time.
We very much appreciate you, James. I may have been muted a minute ago, but we very much appreciate you jumping on here and going over all this with us.
My pleasure, guys. Thank you for having me.
This has been fantastic. And I think that this has really sparked a lot of ideas. And, it's one of those things in working in security, you don't get much sleep as it is, and this will take a couple more minutes off of our sleep schedule. We'll be sleeping, 3 a.m. to 5 a.m. like you one very soon.
Yeah, I will say this, just to sign off. I'm dedicating the entire month of November to veterans. And so veterans get 2 days a year. And I'm like, what the hell? People get a whole month to celebrate whatever cause they got. Like you have, I can't tell you every month is a month for something. And yet the veterans, the people who pay the ultimate sacrifice, people who come back and with injuries or people who lose their lives. So for the entire month of November on all of my podcasts, I'll be airing episodes every single day at 2 p.m. Eastern time with veterans in cybersecurity. So if you guys are able to tune in and support those people and comment and let them know that you appreciate their service, that would be amazing. And I'd really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Yep, that'd be great.
Thank you so much, James.
Awesome.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Talk to you guys soon.
Thank you, James. It was
Take
good.
care.
It was a
I
pleasure.
appreciate
Thank you,
it.
James.
Bye-bye.
Much appreciated.
Bye.